for many of you, I suppose that the history of Sudan is not so clear. So I think it's necessary for us to have an insight, a very short insight into the history of ancient Sudan. So it's what was called, among several names, Ethiopia, land of Bow, the land of Kush. So the land of Kush lied south of Egypt, approximately between Aswan and Khartoum. This buffer zone between the first and the second cataract being alternatively Kushite and Egyptian. So different kingdoms have happened in Kush. The first of them is the kingdom of Kerma, approximately from 2500s to 1500s before Christ. And the capital, as you can see here, was in the vicinity of the Third Cataract. After several centuries of Egyptian domination, colonization, a second kingdom rose in Napata. Napata is then at the foot of the Jebel Barkal, the holy mountain, not far from the Fourth Cataract. We don't know exactly when the kingdom started, probably around 900 before Christ, but it's not quite accurate, you know. It lasted until 270 before Christ and comprised the different periods, as we will see later. And finally, the kingdom of Meroe succeeded the kingdom of Napata with no real break at the beginning, at least. It's really the same civilization. There have not been any Egyptian colonization between the two kingdoms, but little and little, because the elite are from the south, there will be some change, especially in cultural and religious aspect of the Kushite civilization. So let's have some images about that. So this is a model which is displayed in the Kerma Museum of the city of Kerma around 1600 before Christ. That is at its acme, when it was really the main rival of what was left of Egypt, because don't forget that this time Lower Egypt was in the hand of people called the Hyksos. After that, the Egyptian colonization started with 1 century of battles between the Kushite and the Egyptian. And it is only during the reign of Hatshepsut and Thutmose III that finally Kush was really defeated. It was commemorated later. Still, you know this famous chest found in the tomb of King Tutankhamun. And of course, Tutankhamun never fought against the Nubians, but still, this victory is commemorated, and the name of Kush is, of course, followed by wretched, here, this wretched land of Kush. So Kush became a colony with a viceroy at its head, whose principal duty was to gather the tribute and to bring it annually in front of Pharaoh. We can see here a facsimile by Bonomi of the famous reliefs from the temple of Beit El Wali with Nubians, then Kushite, let's say Kushite, Nubians, something a bit different. Kushite bringing then the products of Inner Africa to the king, including white animals and ebony, ivory, all things that could also be used as diplomatic gifts with the different rulers of the Middle East. We don't know exactly when Egypt retired north, probably a little after the beginning of the first millennium before Christ. After that, a very Egyptianized kingdom arose in the vicinity of the Jebel Barkal in Napata. The kings of Napata became more and more powerful, and organize their army the Egyptian way. And finally invade first Higher Egypt and Upper Egypt, sorry, and after Lower Egypt during the reign of King Pianki. You can see here a detail from the Victory Stela and the petty kings of the Delta kneeling in front of King Pianki. After Pianki was established a real Egyptian dynasty. It is called the 25th dynasty or the Kushite dynasty. And for more than 60 years, different kings coming from Sudan were ruling from nearly Jerusalem to nearly Khartoum. This was the case of the most famous of them, King Taharqa, which you can see on the screen here, who was probably the most famous, notably because he covered Egypt and Sudan with monuments, being a kind of a new Ramses II. Unfortunately, Taharqa was toppled by the Assyrian king and had to flee to the south. And his successor, Tanuetamani, reigned only 9 months before being defeated by the armies of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. So from this time on, the Kushite ruler would rule only on their ancestral territory south of the Second Cataract. They were buried then first in El Kuru and now in Nuri Royal Cemetery. And you can see how Egyptianized they were, even by adopting the pyramid as a funerary monument at a time when these monuments were abandoned for a long time, by the Egyptian kings. So another proof of this Egyptianization is their appearance, their regalia. This is the third purely Napatan, I would say, reigning only on the Kushite territory, King Anlamani. And you can see by this statue found in Dukigal, that is close to Kerma, in 2003, that his appearance is totally pharaonic. He wears the double crown, the ancestral crown of the pharaohs. He has the horn of god Hamun, which is in Sudan figured as a ram. And so is just claiming that he is the son of Amun. And on the crown, you can see the two cobras that are symbolizing his power on Egypt and on Kush. You can see that even if there were no more kings of Egypt, they tend to proclaim a legitimacy on this lost territory. And the new pharaohs of the 26th dynasty, who succeeded the Assyrian domination, felt that as offensive. And one of them, King Psamtik II, sent an army against the kingdom of Kush during the reign of a new Napatan king called Aspelta. So the idea was not to conquer Kush again, but to put an end to their claim to the throne of Egypt. So Aspelta at this time was probably a youngster, as you can see by his small statue here. But this marked a kind of breaking point in the history of Kush. At this moment, the close connection between the kingdom of Egypt and between the scribes of Egypt, between all that could come from Egypt was cut, and the kingdom of Kush would start a life of its own, if I can say so. So the breaking point cannot be more symbolized than by this favisa. There are 3 favisas have been found with the remains of the statues of the kings of the 25th dynasty and the early Napatan kings, who were broken by the soldiers of Psamtik II. Fortunately, the priests buried them very carefully, so that finally there was just some glue necessary to bring these statues to their original aspect. So after this time of Aspelta, the different trains are very often marked by stelas, which are the chronicles of the reigns. And so you've got here the election stela of King Aspelta, and I will show you some other stelae which are really the places where we can find those Napatan transcriptions of Kushite names. This is also in Nubian Museum, King Asiotef stela, which is from the 4th century BC. A bit later, King Nastasen stela is now in Berlin Museum. It was brought back by Lepsius. And finally, but there are many others, King Aryamani stela from Kawa is now in Copenhagen. So after the kingdom of Napata came the kingdom of Meroe, then at the beginning of the 3rd century before Christ. And it marks finally a new dynasty which is originating from the south and has probably less pharaonic tradition, less Egyptian influence, because this territory had been never colonized by the Egyptians of the New Kingdom. So a new writing system and a new script appeared. You can see here 2 Meroitic inscriptions and between the figure of King Taneyinabani, who reigned in the middle of the 2nd century before Christ. Finally, the kingdom of Meroe fell under the strokes of a great people living west of the Nile, as is quoted in the Greek sources, called the Nubai. So this word Nubai is in fact a Meroitic word originally, meaning slaves, and nothing to do with gold, of course. And they gave their name to the country, which became then the land of the Nuba and later Nubia. One of their first king, King Silko, who reigned in the middle of the 5th century AD, is figured here as a Meroitic ruler, that is a mixture of Egyptian, you can see here the Khem crown, and Hellenistic Greco-Roman features. Here it's not an angel, of course, it is the goddess Nike, the goddess of victory. So let's come after this introduction to my main topic, which is the transcription then of a Kushite name in Egyptian. And let's first have a look on the general issues about transcriptions of foreign names by the Egyptian scribes. The first Sudanese names, because we still don't know if there were really Meroitic speakers, are found, then their name are found in bewitchment text. Here is a prisoner, a prisoner's figure, which was found in Saqqara, and it includes then some bewitchment lines for all the rulers around Egypt. And it always starts with the most dangerous of them, that is the king of Kush, which is also the southernmost ruler of the borders of Egypt. So his name is a bit difficult to render, but the name of his mother, for example, Titai, is written here in hieroglyphic transcription, even in group writing transcription, which was quite common at this time, not only for the people of the south, for people of Nubia, but also for all the rulers of the Middle East and Libya, who were also inscribed on this kind of statues. A bit later, around 1600 before Christ, we have this list of foreign names on the back of Papyrus Golenishev, which is kept in Pushkin Museum. And this time, there are foreign names written in hieratic, and you can see that it's very carefully written, and some of them have obvious links with Meroitic. We can say that it's Proto-Meroitic. An example is here. For example, here it reads Masha Magas, something like that. And it has a parallel in later Meroitic, Masha Makas, which would mean child or belonging to the sun god. In fact, translated into Egyptian, this is a kind of early version of Ramses, because Ramses means also the one who was begotten by the sun god. So Egyptian transcription of ancient Sudanese names are not different at this time. We are now in the New Kingdom, not different from the Eastern, Middle Eastern kings, for example. So here we are in Soleb, then in the main, the biggest Egyptian temple of Sudan, built under Amenhotep III. And in this famous prisoners' hall are figured all the neighbors of Egypt, some of them enemies, but it's also a kind of bewitchment. Here are two unknown African chieftains, and their name, as you can see, is transcribed more or less accurately in phonetic hieroglyphs. We are here on the southern part of this hall, and on the northern part you got the kings, let's say the kingdoms and principalities of the Near East. Here, for example, you can see the city of Kadesh, which would become famous 100 years later by the battle between Ramses II and the Hittite. Here also, it's just a kind of a phonetic rendering with no special research, delicacy in the transcription. So these transcriptions were made by Egyptian scribes for foreign names. And what makes Napatan transcriptions so particular is that they were made by local scribes, or at least scribes living locally in Kush, even if some of them were of Egyptian origin, and that for local name and all that in Egyptian. And so it's quite different of the transcription we can have, for example, people of the northeastern Asia, which have their own culture, their own literacy, which is different from Egyptian. This is not the case in Napata, where literacy is Egyptian, in fact. So I will distinguish three kinds of transcription of Kushite name. First, as we have seen, phonetic transcription at all periods. The one we have seen just now before with in Soleb. Then Egyptianized transcription. So what I mean by Egyptianized is that it's made by Egyptian scribes, and Meroitic is treated, Napatan names are in early Meroitic. Meroitic is treated, in fact, as if it were Egyptian. They try to find Egyptian equivalent for rendering these Kushite names. And finally, those that are really the Napatan transcription, and I call them Egyptian-style transcription. They start during the Kingdom of Napata, after this breaking point, which I mentioned before, at the beginning of the reign of Aspelta. So I call them Egyptian-style because, in fact, it's not the idea is not to adapt to adapt foreign names to Egyptian writing is to adapt Egyptian writing to a foreign language. So let's have a look first at the Kushite name, which are then transcribed just phonetically. So it can be very simple. For example, the name of Taharqa, King Taharqa, is just transcribed by its consonant THRQ. But there are also some rare rendering into group writings, like here in the Demotic papyrus. And similarly, we have also Shabako, which is written in what I would call a semi-syllabic transcription here. But there is a transcription with group writing, which is found in abnormal hieratic papyrus Louvre. And then here, I take this opportunity to advertise the conference in two weeks of my colleague Marwan Kilani, who would speak much better than I can about group writing function and functioning. So let's come to Egyptianize the transcription of Napatan name. They are still the work of Egyptian scribe, and the earliest of them is the name of Pianki, which is definitely, I can't, of course, get into details about that. Definitely not PA, of course. If you say PA, you must say Tutamun instead of Tutankhamun. The Ankh is pronounced, of course, and it has never it doesn't mean life in Meroitic, as it has been suggested many times. So Pianki was the conqueror of Egypt. His original name was in early Meroitic pronounced something like Bungi. It will be later written Bokhriye. And so it was paraphrased by the Egyptian compound Pa-Anri, the living one, which was pronounced Ponki, as we know by the Greek late transcription, Ponkis. And so the scribe found an Egyptian equivalent, and it was so witty that finally, for a long, long time, people thought that the name Pianki was an Egyptian name. So I could also term this Egyptianized transcription Chinese style transcription. So the scribe would try to find equivalent that are phonetically closed in Egyptian, so that they can write the Meroitic name with complete Egyptian word. And of course, this include logograms and not only phonograms, as would be the case with phonetic transcription. This is the way Chinese transcribe foreign names, possibly with witty or pleasant counterpart. France, for example, is Faguo, land of Lao, Guo being land, and Fa is more or less reminiscent of the name France. And the brand IKEA is called something like Richa, the easy house, which is quite a good transcription for this kind of brand, you know. We have this kind of thing also with a queen, the mother of the divine adoratress Ameniadis II. So this queen is Pabatma II. There have been a Pabatma III 2 generations before, and she was buried in Abydos in Egypt, where she lived for a long time, probably not far from her daughter. So the name is not known. The Pabatma I gave here is Pabatma the first. In fact, she is the second Pabatma has her name transcribed by Egyptian scribe according this Egyptianized transcription. That is, they tried to find an equivalent which would be Egyptian. I wouldn't say good Egyptian because it reads Pa-Ipto-Meri, which means the one who desires Egypt, and the one is in the masculine, as and she is a queen. So you can see that the transcription is far from perfect, and it's even a bit funny. Oops. And another case is one of the names of Shabako. So you know that pharaohs have 5 names, and this is the second, the 2 mistresses. And it is Sebek Tawi, which is a bit difficult to translate because Sebek means to be lucky. So in this compound, it is supposed to mean to bless, and so it would mean the one who blesses the 2 lands. But it seems that it is also a bit awkward, and the main goal is to have an Egyptian version of the name Shabako. So let's come to those Napatan transcription finally, that is this Egyptian style transcription with this Ushepti of Queen Madikene, where you can see one of those classifiers that are the main point of interest for the next part of this lecture. So in this Napatan transcriptions, Egyptian signs are used as classifiers. They are not classifiers or determinative. This is the old-fashioned term. Then sometimes they are not classifiers at all. This is the case for the first, which is the most common, which is the logogram Nefer, which is used as a classifier for Meroitic Malu, beautiful, good, which is exactly the equivalent of Nefer, and also for Mali, which means beauty or beautiful woman. The second is child, and this is really a classifier in Egyptian. It is used then for the noun and adjective mate or masse, which means child, little, young. And finally, then a logogram, which is also a classifier, nature, and then this flag, temple flag, which is used for the noun maka, meaning god or goddess, excuse me. Yeah, I just remind you that there is no grammatical gender in Meroitic, so that maka can be also a goddess. So some examples. The first is the name of royal wife of Atlanersa and mother of Senkamanisken, called Malitarata. This is my transcription. Sometimes she's called Maletaral or etc. So you can see that the sign Nefer is used after Ma-li or Malu, and is used then as a classifier, as if finally the language which is here was Egyptian. A second example is the name of the royal wife of King Anlamani, that is Madikene. So Madikene includes Madi, which is in transcriptions of Mate, the child, and so the image of a child appears here, and exactly like in Egyptian, it is a classifier with the meaning little, child, young. Finally, the name of one of Aspelta's royal wife, Makamalo, whose name literally means the good deity. So you can see that Malu, which is written here, M-L, is not accompanied by a specifier, by a classifier. But the first part, that is Maka, God, is here specified by the classifier of the divine flag. So let's come to additional classifiers which were recently found. This stela from year 3 of King Aspelta was found in Sanam at an undetermined time, and finally was brought in Europe by one of the first explorer of Sudan. It's not Caillou, it's Linon Belfond. And finally, it landed, if I can say so, in the Louvre Museum. And this one was found in 1999 in the excavations of Dukigal, which is a royal place from the time of the Kingdom of Kerma and the Egyptian colonization, which is really close from Kerma. So what's interesting is that they include the same text with different name, but not all of them. In fact, they are devoted to the reorganization of the cult of Amun and the ascription of some royal women to the cult of Amun. And each time there is a delegation which came from the central power in Napata, which include the same persons. And there are, of course, local officers also who are present. But what is interesting is to see the difference between the transcription of the names by the scribe of Dukigel and by the scribe of Sanam. And there are some differences that are significant. They were published then in 2013 by Dominique Valbel with a special chapter I did then about these transcriptions. So you can have a look already at the index of names, all those officials that came for this ceremony in the temple of Amun of Sanam and in the temple of Amun of Pnups, Pnups being Dukigel. So you can see here that there is a mixture among them, among these officers, of people with an Egyptian name that are really Egyptian and other that are really Kushite. For example, this one called Unennefer is clearly an Egyptian. Unennefer is just a byname of Osiris. This is the same for this one, Padi Imen Nipet, the one which has been given by Amun of Luxor, is also an Egyptian. And this one, Padi Nebu, the one given by the god of gold, is also an Egyptian. But this first, which is found on both stela, you see in the stela from the Louvre and in the stela from Dukigel, has clearly a foreign name, and it is a Kushite. And this is the same for this one, who has not an Egyptian name and who is a Kushite also. So it's interesting to see that at this turning point of the Kushite kingdom, because it's just a few months maybe after the attack of Psamtik II on the Napatan kingdom. We have then this mixture, and little there will be more notably scribes and clerics, having learned their profession locally, than expatriate Egyptians. So let's have a look at this person. So this person is called the Count of Nubia, so it's an administrator. His name here is written Malowi Yamani, or Malowi Amun, this is the name of Amun. In Sanam, the transcriptions is more complicated. And finally, the name is the same than a king that would rule a bit later on Napata, 1 century later, which was called until now Malowiye Bamani. In fact, the B here in the transcription come from these two signs. So you can just notice by the way that Malu is present everywhere. The Malu, the Nefer for Malu, the classifier for good in Egyptian is written after ML or MR. It depends on the transcriptions, in fact. But what is more interesting is to come to these two signs. You can see that they are present here. They are present here in the name of the king, and they are absent here. So it shows that it doesn't have a phonetic value. It is in fact a compound classifier, which is known in Egyptian, leg plus feet, especially for verbs like trample, flee, etc. In Egyptian. So in Egyptian, malo we have seen means good, and wawi means to travel, to get across. It can be found in the Meroitic text of course, the classical period, that is the Kingdom of Meroe later. Its meaning can be induced from the fact that it was borrowed into Old Nubian in the verb wow, which means to travel by boat. So the idea is to travel, to get across, and so I would hypothesize that the translation of this Meroitic name could be he made a beautiful arrival, Amun, with an anti-topic, which is at the end here. So let's come to the second example. So this one is a director of the scribes of Kush. So you see, it's really a cleric and not just an administrator. And it shows that there are scribes of Kush that might be not all Egyptian. So his name is Lama Amani. The lion cannot be an R because R is impossible at the beginning of the Meroitic words, as it is also for Nubian and all the languages from the same family. So the transcription would be with L. So you can see here a sign which is here absent. For that reason, again, then it can be considered as a classifier and not as a phonetic sign. It was used by the scribe of Dukigel, but not by the scribe of Sanam. So this classifier is normally used to pray, dua, but also to hide, imen. And in this case, it is a variant of a more complete sign showing a man hiding behind a wall. So this is a Meroitic word, but we have no clue into Meroitic text to know what it can mean. We can resort to related languages like Nara, a close language from Eritrea, but a modern language, where Lamo means to hide. And in Nimang, a related language a bit more remote, Lum means skin. And skin and to hide is, as you know, semantically related. In English, for example, hide is skin, of course, for example, a panther hide, but it's also the verb to hide. So we have also a Meroitic person name, Lamaloye, which means he is hidden, probably, with the ye, which is the normal suffix for personal names. So I would tentatively translate that he is hidden Amun, and of course it's a pun, because Amun means the one who is hidden. So if all those Napatan transcription have continued to be used, and also maybe in not only in personal names, but also in nouns and verbs, etc., we could finally it could finally result in a kind of a mixed script, as is the case with the Japanese script, for example. So here in this text in Japanese, we have a Japanese phonogram called kana, hiragana and katakana, and we have also kanjis that are Chinese logogram. And in this case, the kanji would be replaced by purely Egyptian logograms, and the kana would be just phonetic signs borrowed from what is called the Egyptian alphabet, the Egyptian Amjad, as we have seen in the first transcriptions that are completely phonetic. But this never happened. At the beginning of the kingdom of Meroe, where probably the scribes were not the same, they were not as maybe as refined as those castes of priests from Napata, Napata, which has been founded by the Egyptian. Well, anyway, for any reason, the scribe came back to pure phonetic transcription, as you can see here, with trials to have some writing elements, but not a lot, in fact. Just have a look at Queen Kanata, for example. It's KNRT, just that. So was this habit of using Egyptian classifier completely abandoned? Not completely. We have a very late reminiscence of this method in the temple of Naga, not far from Khartoum. But before, just to mention that the Meroitic script, which was invented at the beginning of the kingdom of Napata, was purely phonetic. You can see here the names for good, beautiful, child, little, god, goddess are written only with phonetic signs in cursive and in hieroglyphs. And there are two scripts, but they work exactly similarly. In fact, there is a correspondence 1-to-1 to each sign. So here in Naga, we can find the last glimpse of those Napatan classifiers. We are here behind the temple of the lion, and you can see a figure of the main god, Kushite god, the main Meroitic god, Apedemak, with three heads, one here, not very visible, and one head turned towards the Candace, the queen, and the other towards the king. For that reason, there are two inscriptions that are parallel here. They are termed then REM, Répertoire d'épigraphie méroïtique 18 and 19. The texts are the same, even if this one is partly erased. So in the first we have Bawarit Labachata, give them life, life being Bawarit. And in the second, you can find the same text, Bawarit Labachate, give them life, but the sentence is followed by the Meroitic version of the sign of life, An, which is in fact signed Bawarit. So you can see that in fact what is here specified by a classifier is not the word for life, which is a bit far, it's here, but it is the whole sentence. Then it is really something which is far from the use of the Napatan classifiers. So with this wish, give them life, I wish you a good health, and this is the end of this lecture. Thank you.